All right, we're started. Everyone should be in here. If we get some yeses in the chat, if you're here, you see us, you hear us.
Hi, everyone.
Beautiful. It being 1 p.m. Eastern time, or civilized time as we call it. Let's give folks a couple minutes. In the meantime, you'll just be hanging out with Courtney and I as we get ready to talk about some lessons learned from the wonderful world of CMMC. Good to see you all. Courtney repping the beautiful Engage branding there.
Brand new, just in today.
Gotta love it. Hopefully everyone's having a good week. Somehow it's Thursday already, and somehow it's April already. But for my part, April's kind of nice because I have my window open, and winter is effectively over. We'll get one last freeze, unfortunately. But
we're in the middle of that, Andy.
Here.
Over here, It's been like 80 for the last couple of weeks, which is scary. But today we had a hailstorm, and now there's snow sticking to the ground.
Yeah, we've had a bit of that where it's like 80, 40, 80, 30, 80. I'm just hoping to be done with it. All right, see, a good amount of folks are in here. We'll give it one more minute, and then we'll kick this off. I'm going to go ahead and share to make sure that this all works. And again, if I can get a thumbs up or so in the chat, let me know you can see this. How are we looking? Can you all see it? Beautiful. It's all the thumbs up. Get my laser pointer if we need that. Technology, y'all. And I don't think that's a Teams premium feature. I think that's just a Teams feature. Nice. They didn't hide that one behind the licensing. So sometimes do. Gotta love them. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Sentinel Blue, if you don't know us well, if this is your first time interacting with us, we're very casual. Our whole interest in putting on content like this is to share useful information to you, whether you're a customer, whether you're a prospect, whether you're someone who just found us on LinkedIn. The chat is available the whole time, and we do not mind being interrupted with questions. We will try to stay, largely on topic, and we do have questions at the end. But if we're talking about something and you're looking for clarification, by all means, throw it in the chat. Or if you want to share your own experience, throw it in the chat. We want this to be interactive and useful. From a housekeeping standpoint, this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and it will be posted to the Sentinel Blue LinkedIn and the Sentinel Blue YouTube afterward. You will also get an email if you register it as an attendee with a link to view it. There have been challenges with the link that gets sent out automatically because it is hosted on our SharePoint, and we are on GCC High, which sometimes doesn't work if you're not also on GCC High, which is why we posted on our LinkedIn and our YouTube as well. The goal today is to share 10 of the many lessons learned through the last 15 months of supporting CMMC Level 2 assessments. Real quick, just as a background for Sentinel Blue and our expertise in regards to CMMC, we're kind of deep in it, and we're really at the center of, or CMMC's at the center of what we've been doing. So we're a C3PAO. That's a large part of our practice. That's not the side of the business that Courtney and I participate on. It's not really the angle of our talk today, but we do operate a C3PAO. We have issued somewhere, I want to say, north of 25 CMMC Level 2 certifications under that team. So we've got expertise in-house, and I'm a lead CCA. Courtney's a CCP, just deep in on the CMMC expertise. We are ourselves CMMC Level 2 certified. So Sentinel Blue got a CMMC Level 2 certification. We were among the first last January when the program was finally authorized. And we were certified at our enterprise level. So our whole company, end-to-end, and all the services that we provide under our SHIELD program is all under our CMMC Level 2 certification. And as I mentioned, we employ a number of CMMC certified assessors, CMMC certified professionals. across our staff, folks like myself and Courtney are credentialed. Now, what really matters for the purpose of our lessons learned is not just that we have the credentials and that we're a C3PO and certified ourselves, but we did recently share on our socials that we passed 20 certifications that we've directly supported. For context there, the 20 that we've supported have been Shield program clients of ours. And our Shield program is a full end-to-end IT managed services plus managed security services with our security operations team, and then our Pathfinder compliance program team. So this is our full comprehensive suite of capabilities that we deliver. It's not 20 clients that we can claim got certified that we like sold licensing to or something to that effect. That number is actually larger than 20 in terms of clients we've overall, had something to do with who've since been certified. But the 20 we're talking about are specifically Shield program clients of ours who we have been in the room and in almost all cases been leading through the assessment process. For me personally, I've been in all 20 of the ones that I'm going to reference and that these lessons are coming from. Courtney has been directly involved in the implementation and the assessment for these companies. So we only bring that up to tell you, hey, we're 20 of the 1,000 odd CMMC certifications that have been conducted. It's a pretty good sample. And we're not, sharing third party information in terms of like what we've heard is going on in the assessments. No, this is actual on the ground experience for myself and Courtney. By background, I'll just do a quick introduction for myself. If you don't know me, I'm Andy Sauer. I'm the CEO of Sentinel Blue. If you can't tell, I'm an implementer. I'm a doer of things at heart, and I'm still very much involved in the CMMC ecosystem as a lead CCA, helping our clients close their gaps and get certified. That's me, Courtney. I'll let you introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, I'm Courtney. My title here is Engage Program Manager, which translates to I'm in charge of our customer success arm by way of service desk analyst. So I've done a little bit of many of the things around the block, and I'm just happy to be here and share what we've learned.
All right. So with all that introduction, let's get to the good part. We have 10 lessons learned. Before we get to the 10 lessons learned, I just have a couple quick things that come up that are like things I get asked often about that I want to cover real quick. Big one on my radar is FedRAMP. You all have heard about FedRAMP. You know it's in your DFAR 7012 requirement related to cloud services and when you're going to use cloud services. You use FedRAMP, moderate, authorized, or equivalent. And there's a whole lot of nuance to that. But the main thing I want to point out that has been proven true through the many assessments we've been through now, you only need FedRAMP for systems that are storing, processing, or transmitting CUI. And it's explicitly limited to those systems. What it does not include are systems that could be misused to access, process, store, or transmit CUI. This has been some debate that was going on prior to the CMMC program launching in earnest, but I think now it's generally been proven, and certainly in our experience, all 20 of ours, we use cloud tools that if somebody used them in an unauthorized way or sort of like broke out of the containment of a tool, could store, process, or transmit CUI. We don't believe those systems have to be FedRAMP because they're not designed and they're not authorized for use in storing, processing, or transmitting CUI. So you really only need to FedRAMP the tools that are designed for and are authorized for handling CUI. Scope definition is a big concept in CMMC, and a couple of our lessons are going to reference scope and controlling scope. I just want to remind everybody, you control your scope. You define your scope. Your C3PO, whoever you hire to come do your assessment, does not come in and redefine your scope. You have to plausibly explain your scope. And if they see obvious errors where they're like, hey, you mentioned you send CUI to, Google Cloud, something to that effect, and they know it's not FedRAMP, yeah, they'll question that, but they're not there to pick at every possible hole in your scoping. You define it. You've probably heard this one before. This just bears repeating. This serves your interest very well. Your system security plan, this fantastical document that's like constantly referenced and is at like the center of the documentation. first of all, one of our lessons, we'll talk about this. Don't overthink it. It lives way larger than it should in everyone's head. But as a document that serves you during assessment, it's way more effective if you write to the assessment objectives from 800-171A, because assessors are looking to satisfy those objectives. They're not looking to satisfy the requirements necessarily, the 110. They're looking to satisfy all 320 objectives. That's what they're required to do. So if you write your documentation to that, it bears out. And finally, this is all still new. 15 months in to a program at the size and scale of CMMC is very new. And I can tell you, as someone who's deeply involved in the ecosystem and a number of the industry organizations, there is still a ton of debate going on about what regulations mean, what they say, what certain wording means. Much of it is still being worked out. That creates the conditions that I think we're all kind of in. That's frustrating, where there's just not a ton of clarity. And I know, Courtney and I can both back this up from our client experience. Sometimes a client asks us a question, and we have to kind of say, sorry, there's no clear answer to that. The DoD hasn't weighed in on that, or we haven't seen if there's precedent for that. So a lot of the way you need to interact and make decisions in the CMMC ecosystem is using good reason that you'd be comfortable defending, because it's not all binary yet. And probably we don't want it to be that way. We like the latitude. Those are my quick hits. Let's get into some lessons, Courtney.
Let's do it. So this is the most critical, and you've probably heard it everywhere, but it is really important, which is know where your CUI actually lives. The big thing is we see clients who they have different systems. Maybe they're manufacturing, they have an ERP system, something like that. Very easily CUI can spread, even if you have a process and you think it shouldn't be. And so when you first get started, the most important thing that you do first is identify where your CUI is and how does it actually move within your organization.
Yeah. So hopefully everyone knows this, but I'll sort of reiterate this first point. These requirements, 800-171, it follows the data, follows the CUI itself. The CUI data is the mechanism that the DoD has identified as their way of making the DIB do security. So they've attached it to the data. It follows that wherever the data goes, the requirements go. A pretty common experience for us on the Sentinel Blue side when we're brought into a new client is the folks that we end up talking to might make assumptions about where the CUI is, and they've been told certain things. Sometimes well into an engagement, several months in, we find out, hey, there's this whole other project over here, this whole other team that's using a whole other tool that no one's ever talked about. And everyone's kind of surprised. And sometimes it's pretty late in the game where this sort of news comes up, or someone has altered a process, to go print a different part out over here and brought in this whole computer that was never accounted for. You have to know where the CUI is actually being used throughout the organization. It's not about where it's idealistically used, it's about where is it actually going. Organic spread of CUI is a big thing. In the moment, the day-to-day, we understand, your business's role is to accomplish the goals of your business, right? And that's deliver the service that you're selling, deliver the parts that you're selling. It totally follows that CUI spreads where it needs to support those operations. It can just be very hard to keep eyes on where that CUI is going. And it just takes a purposeful effort where you do have to just stay engaged and you really have to do the investigation. And it can feel a little burdensome and onerous to constantly be trying to control this. And I know I've talked to a number of folks who are in IT management or cybersecurity at some of our clients who express a lot of frustration with the larger business they support because it constantly is moving things without authorization. That effort bears out and it's worth pursuing and staying on top of because it will save you down the line from some major challenges if CUI ends up in systems that you haven't accounted for in any of your architecture. So accurate scoping, you really have to understand where the data is actually going, how it's actually being used. And I think the best way to go about that is talk to the people who are actually doing it and really build an understanding of the processes that involve CUI.
Which brings us perfectly to our next point, which is compliance supports your business, not ultimately that your business supports compliance. What we're getting at here is we've talked to clients who they've come in and somebody says, you can fit all your CUI in this pretty box, and then you don't have to think about any of your other systems. And we've watched that get people to some painful places. And it's really important when you're considering your processes, your workflows, and looking at how CUI moves, that you figure out what works for your business and your operations. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to have a functional business for the compliance part to matter. Because if you just have a compliance checklist and you can't really do your day-to-day business operations, well, you're not going to have a contract that requires the compliance part anymore.
Yeah, this comes up a lot. Around enclaves is a common sort of architectural model, and the enclave model it makes a lot of sense in certain scenarios. It's often the default position a lot of companies want to pursue because it's a good cost controller. Especially if you know a minority of the folks in your organization need access to CUI, it's a great way to control for cost. It just doesn't always bear out in true usability. And I find a lot of people can easily convince themselves they're going to make the enclave work for them, even though it just goes up against every existing process they have where it creates friction and difficulty. And we've helped more than a few companies get out of the enclave. We've helped more than a few get expanded into the enterprise after starting from an enclave. And a lot of times that's just the usability is not it's not as strong as an enterprise model. This is especially true in like manufacturing environments. A lot of times there's this thought, hey, if we just need to go view the technical drawing, we can do it just in the enclave, in the virtualized enclave. That works up until someone needs that print on the floor somewhere. And then all bets are off, everything's back in scope. So consider when you're doing your architecture and your planning, consider what actual business processes include CUI and what do we actually have to support. What I add here is usable realism is much better than unusable idealism. A lot of folks in security, myself among them, will sit down to write a policy, and we want to explore every possible angle. We want to account for every possible gap, and we end up with a 20-page policy, to dictate a process that takes someone 5 minutes a day. It becomes unusable. It's idealistic and it covers everything, and it's going to impress an assessor, but it's not usable. And a lot of times you can't even get across the finish line when you have such an idealistic goal. It's so much better to get something on paper that's 3, 4, 5 pages maybe, that talks about the actual reality and supports the actual process. I love the point Courtney, makes about forcing unnatural workflows is a great way to create failure. Your users and the folks who do the actual, doing of the work, if you create unnecessary and you create excessive friction to their workflows, they're going to find ways around it. And a strong security model is one that considers how they make it easier for the users to do the right thing, not harder to do their day-to-day work.
Which brings us perfectly to our next point. I don't think Andy could have set that up better even if he tried.
Almost like we planned all this.
This point is about you want a secure environment. At the end of the day, the CMMC program is there to provide compliance, but it isn't a security program. But the goal is to protect the data you have in your environment. And so when you're approaching this, we have had plenty of conversations where somebody, like a good example is like, well, we'll just stop printing CUI, which if you can do that, great, you should. It reduces your scope and it's awesome. But if you know that, maybe you have someone in your company who sits up at the executive level and they want the hard copy, or you're taking it to a floor and those people looking off tablets just isn't a realistic opportunity, you want to make sure you're building a program that supports those same things, those business operations. You want a program that supports how your data is going to move and what things look like on the day-to-day. Because if you try to slap a Band-Aid on and say, well, we just won't do that, or, well, what if we only allow it in this one place, and it's not what really happens, all of a sudden you're going to have a bunch of patchwork instead of a strong program that make sure you are protecting your data, not just the CUI.
Yeah, this point about building a security program goes a mile deep. And there's so many different, sort of roots off the core structure of this point. It's not a compliance checklist that we're working toward. Now, a lot of the assessment experience is going to feel a bit like a checklist. And I'm sure there are companies who are getting through who just kind of knock the checklist out. But to make this work and to make it work with the other points, right? To actually support your business and not create a ton of unnecessary friction, building something that's holistic and comprehensive as a program that's going to be serviced and be part of your how you operate as an organization going forward solves for a lot of the challenges that would otherwise come up. One of the other things that we commonly run into is band-aid fixes or just like quick deviations to say, okay, well we'll change this thing over here that we know is going to cause a problem, but it's like a quick thing we can do. Often these things accumulate and they become debt, right? They become tech debt. One day you're going to have to pay that off. And oftentimes it's after you've piled up enough quick fixes and band-aids that taking it apart becomes infeasible because everything is now sort of on top of an insecure foundation and the whole thing will crumble. And you end up creating a lot more work for yourself long-term and a lot of instability. And you take some serious hits to resiliency and your timelines start to fall because your early tactical decisions were to make quick fixes and not to address the core problem and to get to, like, again, back to the earlier point, how the actual process has to operate. Clients and security can be strong partners. There's this whole thing, if you follow on LinkedIn, there's people say compliance isn't security, then you have people who really reject that notion. The whole thing's kind of silly. They're partners in concept for helping your business be resilient. Compliance, I generally see as a strong byproduct of good security. I don't think compliance should really lead security. I think your mind should be on how do I implement the security requirements in a way that suits my business, that I can actually service, that can actually fit for this 50-person company versus 500-person company versus 5,000, and keeping that in mind. And then compliance tends to be a natural byproduct. You will still have to make some compliance decisions where there are certain things you might not otherwise have to do if it wasn't written as a requirement. If you design for a security program that actually works for you, as opposed to designing for compliance checklists, it bears out long-term to be a much better option.
So this is a fun one. You want a security program, not a documentation set. There, I'm sure, is somebody right now writing a LinkedIn post about how important your CMMC documentation is and how it should be your largest focus. Something we run up with our clients is it's one of the last pieces we do when we're preparing our clients for their assessment, because the real thing is documentation is a byproduct of everything you're already doing. And if you're trying to write a process or document how something is going to pan out, but it's not how you're currently doing it, that goes back to all the things that we've already talked about. It's just not going to work out. It's going to end up not being reflective of how things go, and it's not going to be organic of how your users are going to do things. At the end of the day, you want to build something that is already going to be reflective of what your company does, and then just write it down. It's actually very simple at the end of the day, but a lot of information out there tries to steer people in the other direction, and it can just end up being a very tense situation trying to figure out which process are you following, the ones your users do, or what you wrote down if you didn't build it organically.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to take my first shot into controversy territory, because this is where I get in trouble sometimes. The easiest part of all of this whole CMMC thing, is the documentation. If you're a provider or a consultant or some other form of business that's trying to tap into the CMMC revenue stream, the easiest path in is documentation. That's the easiest product to put together and sell. I'm not saying it's easy, it's the easiest. So there's something of a bias in the community and the voices that gain a lot of traction on the topic of documentation. And it's also the easiest thing to fall back on. If the technical tends to be harder and more explicit and there's more nuance to it, it's an easy sell to say, like, hey, make sure your SSP is amazing. I find everyone greatly overvalues the documentation. And our lived experience has been, we've put documentation out there, and we don't spend as much time on it as you would have originally thought We spend the time on the technical. We spend the time on the actual implementation. We spend the time showing assessors how the system actually functions. We show them the way people have actually used it, which is how that should be. It's how these systems should be evaluated, how they're actually being used, not how they're described in a document. And if anyone's ever taken like a creative writing class, I hated everything I ever submitted, and I always wanted more time. And I feel the same way about every SSP I've had a hand in writing since I've been in Sentinel Blue. There are aspects of it that if you left me in a full timeline and no deadline, I would never submit a single SSP. I'd be constantly reiterating. These are things that you can continually refine and constantly improve. And I'll also tell you, I've sent the same language in different SSPs to different assessors and gotten different feedback. I've had sometimes a paragraph that they say, this is too long. And the same paragraph, an assessor will say, that doesn't have quite enough. You can never nail the documentation. And that's part of why I think it's sort of the silly thing to focus on, but it can be kind of the easiest and most approachable thing to focus on because everyone knows how to open Word. I think that's not a wise path, and that is bared out. I've long said our strategy. We did our first DibCAC high back in 2021, and I've held this strategy since then. We're going to put our effort, our time, and our energy into our technical implementation. I will gladly and happily put out a document that is not fully optimized, that has, the occasional error. Much more happy to put out a document in that state than a technical configuration in that state. Because a technical configuration that has gaps and errors is one that actually carries risk, operational risk of compromise by an adversary, or much harder to fix, even if it's found in something like a gap analysis or during an assessment, God forbid. Documents are easy to fix. You open up Word, you can fix it. Spend your time, your effort, and your energy on the actual security, on the actual technical implementation, on the actual processes. Going back to our earlier points, use your brain power and your energy there and let the documentation follow. And to Courtney's point, one bit of friction that we have experienced, and I see some clients of ours who have been through an assessment with us, one bit of friction that we'll readily own is the documentation comes late in the game. And there has been an ecosystem understanding that's gotten put out there that you have to start with a document. If you don't have the policies, how do you know what to build? It's not the model that we've ever followed. And so far, we've passed every assessment with a perfect score without having to fix a single thing beyond an occasional documentation update. And by the way, we're not rocket scientists. We're not doing anything that's that proprietary and that crazy from a technical standpoint. We're just focusing our time and our energy where we feel like it gets the most return on our investment. And that's proved out. So I really challenge folks, don't immediately start pursuing your CMMC Level 2 certification by optimizing for your SSP format and going and writing these lengthy policies that cover absolutely everything. Get to the architecture, start with the risks, and address the real problems, and let everything else follow. My last bit I'll add on here from documentation standpoint, there's no shame in using our good friends Claude and ChatGPT to help you with documentation and policy. They're actually really good at it. What I would just recommend is, again, don't make it 40 pages for an incident response policy that no one's ever going to use. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward, keep it usable.
This point, really, you could spend forever talking about it, but we have had so many times where we talk to clients and they're worried about something that is really not occurring in their day-to-day. And they're worried about it because they already have thought about their simple processes and they're like, well, what's going to happen in this one unique one-off situation? And how are we going to make sure we're being compliant there? And really the answer is it's not that big of a deal. Cross that bridge when you get there. Make sure the stuff that's happening every single day are the things that you're focusing on. Really, in every assessment, we start with access control and we spend the most amount of time talking about access control. Because if you are able to control who can get to that data and make sure that those processes are super strong, a lot of the other things just kind of fall in place. It is very, very critical, and we spend a lot of time talking to clients about how important it is to make sure those basic things are in place. Do you know how to onboard someone? Do you know how to offboard someone? What happens when someone changes a position or is leaving when they're upset? How do you make sure that data is protected? And those are the processes that actually matter. And so spend a lot of time thinking about those and worrying about that stuff. And then all of a sudden thinking about what's going to happen one day down the road when this weird one-off situation occurs, it turns out that you probably will already have a process covering it.
Yeah, yeah, and like the previous point, this can go a mile deep. If you're here attending a webinar, presumably you're very interested in CMMC and you want to understand the CMMC lessons, and that's totally fair, and that's what we're here to tell you about. But your priority today might be CMMC, but your priorities will change mightily if tomorrow you have a compromise. You'll forget CMMC immediately if you're told, hey, you were compromised because you didn't have multi-factor authentication on for some service account somewhere. So what we mean by nail the basics is in large part, don't lose sight of the actual risk. It's easy to look at NIST 800-171 and see 110 equal controls, right? And CMMC, I'll be the first to tell you, is a bad model for the most part for achieving security because it creates as much attention for the FIPS validated cryptography requirement, in fact, actually more attention for that than it does for multi-factor authentication. And something north of 90%, I would guess, and I think the data is out there to support this, north of 90% of compromises would probably be stopped if MFA was implemented and done properly, and we were moving toward phishing resistant MFA and getting rid of passwords. Way more impact than working on our FIPS validated cryptography implementation. But they both equal 1 in terms of the score you get when you successfully implement them. Someone in the chat might say, well, MFA is weighted at a -5 if you don't do it properly. That's fair for the assessment thing. But CMMC is an all or nothing. It's a binary. It's you did all 110 or you didn't. And I think some of what people get stuck on is the paralysis of, hey, it's not just turn MFA on, it's figure out these esoteric things like FIPS validated cryptography and dealing with all the questions that opens up of like, do I have to do the firmware, the hardware that was part of the cert and all that sort of thing. Easy to lose sight of that. And that's why we're saying come back, nail the basics. Real risk are the things that are generally well addressed by existing capability, things that are already prolific like MFA. You want to nail those. Moves, adds, and changes, who gets permission into the environment, revisit that. Keep an eye on that. Do reviews of who has access to the system. Do reviews of open accounts. That's where your risk tends to be, and don't lose sight of that. And then the last point you make, Courtney, is routine processes tend to have an outsized security impact. There's a number of processes that CMMC requires you to create and have. They're generally good processes, like an incident response test as a process that you should do. And generally any process that they call out, something you have to do at least annually is the DoD's perspective on things. The ones you do daily are the ones that you're most at risk of suffering for bad design and bad follow-up. It's pretty hard to mess up an annual incident response tabletop test. It's pretty easy to mess up a user offboard. And you only have to miss one of those steps to leave, an area for exploitation of either someone who's been terminated or an attacker who's, compromised the credentials of an account that you didn't close out properly 5 years ago.
Okay, we made it over the line. We're in the second half. Andy's also going to have to give me a minute to soapbox because this is my favorite point, which is the people are the biggest part. They're your largest risk and your greatest asset within your organization, and people have to be on the same page if your security program and your compliance pieces are going to work. I will tangent for a hard minute. My background is not in tech. It is in behavior and education, and I care about this so much. If you're an IT point of contact and you are like, yes, I think this is important, but your leadership or your developers are not on the same page, this is going to be a painful process. Which I don't think anybody really wants me to say, but I can tell you from the start, the more that people are able to talk and be on the same page about, hey, we're doing these things to protect our data. We have this important data that people are trusting us with. We're not doing it because I want to slow you down. We're not doing it for being, we're not an IT company that wants to make something more difficult for you or just to create extra steps because, well, that's what best practice says. It is all there because it makes sense. These practices work. They do protect your data. But if anybody wants to get around them, let's be honest, they can. One of the things we talk about with some of our clients is like, well, what if someone just takes a picture of your computer screen? And that's a real risk that will always exist because at the end of the day, I cannot stand there behind all of your users and be like, don't take out your phone. You're looking at CUI. And it's so important to get everybody on the same page and have buy-in to why you're doing this. And the easiest part to do that is having this data get you a paycheck. And if you want your paycheck, you got to be bought in on how you're doing it.
Yeah, and this is probably, I think most people understand or should understand the risk. It's primarily user-based. Are there, 0-day attacks where adversaries compromise major technology systems? 100%, totally happens. But everyone's reporting, including the DoD, the DC3, the DoD Cybercrime Center, in their regular quarterly reporting, for as long as I can remember, phishing is the #1 attack vector, and phishing is directly an attack against people. So don't get it wrong. The people are your biggest risk. Now, of course, in any organization, your people are your greatest asset. And I love Courtney's soapbox here. Don't lose sight of that. Again, these controls say a lot about systems and processes. They don't address the people a whole lot. But a lot of what the controls are requiring you to do is transform as an organization. And for many of our customers that we've worked with, they're organizations that have been around for 40 years, that have been doing a lot of the same work in a very similar way and have a very deeply ingrained culture or how they've been doing work. And oftentimes we have to come in and be the bearers of news of like, hey, your culture has to adapt. And sometimes the executives have been brought kicking and screaming. And in fairness, rightfully so in some cases, because a lot of what CMMC and NIST 171 require you to do is pretty painful. But for it to be successful, you have to get the buy-in. And starting early and being consistent and upholding the outcome and not bending every time someone's, wants a deviation from a security policy, that'll benefit long term. Spend time and explain why we're doing things. I have a saying here at Sentinel Blue that I encourage everyone to carry, which is, it's gonna be hard questions. I should have good answers. We say the same thing to our clients, and if you're the person implementing CMMC at your organization, I would prepare for hard questions. Be prepared to answer them thoroughly and with good understanding, and you will find people are much more willing to accept the friction you're going to have to create by introducing security into currently insecure procedures and systems if you explain it. The explanation shouldn't just be, well, it's in the contract. Get to why it should matter to them that the data is secure. Explain what happens to companies like Stryker when insecure protocols are in place and attackers compromise them and bring everything to a halt. I can give you many examples of small businesses that are no longer in business because of compromise. If you connect to people at the people level, at the human level, tends to again pan out properly.
I add one more point, which is,
yeah, please.
If you take the time to invest in the roughly going from non-compliant to compliant, the whole shebang can take about 12 weeks. If you're pushing through the full implementation. 3 months of redefining processes, being bought in, learning how to redo things is way less painful than stretching it out over resisting that and having to fight for, potentially a year or two about how processes go. If people are willing to take a little bit of short-term pain and learn and adjust, it really does make things just set you up for success long-term.
All right, Courtney, I'm going to take this one first. I'll let you add color to this one, but 7th lesson is choose the right partners. And partners is plural here for a reason. On your journey, you may be doing it all yourself, and that's totally fine. My experience has been it requires a solid level of expertise to get through NIST 171 and CMMC Level 2 successfully, but plenty of organizations have done it entirely internally. But many, especially in the small and medium business sector, go with a partner. And often it's a partner like Sentinel Blue. My goal here is not to sell you on Sentinel Blue, but when you are pursuing a partnership with a company like Sentinel Blue to either help you implement, help you put the security program in place, or maintain and deliver it as a service going forward, choose very wisely. And I would say choose someone who knows CMMC and who can lead. Um, you don't want to partner with someone who you have to pull along. Often that becomes an anchor. And for most companies, you can't afford any further slowing down of your progress with implementing CMMC. You need someone that's going to force multiply what you already have. And that's when these partnerships work very well, in my experience and our experience at Sentinel Blue. Picking the wrong partner, we encounter fairly often, where we're brought in after someone else has tried. And the common story that we hear is 2 years ago, someone's MSP told them, yeah, we're going to do the CMMC thing with you. And 2 years later, they finally say, hey, we're actually not going to pursue that because it's proving to be too much for the MSP. They have to change the way they do business. And now that's got an organization who's 24 months behind. And here in 2026, the pressure is mounting for people to get CMMC Level 2 certified. So it can be a great derailment if you don't choose wisely. Some markers of a good partner: they need to build understanding of your organization. You don't necessarily want someone who's going to come in and just overprescribe and box you in to everything their way. There needs to be some give and take, and they need to build some understanding of how you operate. Now, I can tell you that is challenging for both parties. For a company like Sentinel Blue, we have a proven method. We have a proven stack. We have tools that we're going to insist that we use. And our clients, we want you to use our processes and follow the way we do things because, listen, we've done 20 CMMC Level 2 assessments and several DIBCACs. It's all, panned out. But we also recognize we can't go against our second point that we just made earlier and say, hey, we're going to shove your business into our way of doing things and forget how your business operates and the processes we actually have to support. So you have to find a partner who's going to have that conversation with you at that level, but you also have to be willing to engage at that level. There is a give and take to any partnership. Anyone who's been married for more than a few years, I think, has learned that lesson. You have to approach each other as peers with a lot of respect, clear communication, and there's going to be disagreement, and there's going to be challenge, but the right partner, you'll be able to work all that through with. My last bit there is partners, plural. The other half of this, the other side of the coin, is your C3PAO. When you go for assessment, a C3PAO should be a collaborator, should feel closer to a partner than it should feel as an adversary. Unfortunately, the CMMC program has created conditions where your certification is a one-time pass or fail, big, scary thing in your brain, and it makes the C3PAOs this intimidating figure to even talk to. Not all of them out there are intimidating. A lot of them out there are trying to be good collaborators, good partners who are motivated to see you succeed and see you succeed the right way. So you have the option of the free market when it comes to CMMC Level 2. Take your time, talk to C3PAOs, talk to the community about C3PAO experiences. Don't just pick the cheapest. Don't just pick the first one who answers the phone. Find a good partner. Anything you want to add, Courtney?
I don't have much to add, but a good partner isn't just going to say yes. And they're also not just going to say, do it our way. It very much, I'm just, keep feeding the horse here, but it is really important that you find someone who will understand what you're doing, but also challenge you to find the right process. I think a good example of this is that we see frequently is external sharing from GCC High, as you already mentioned with our own link can be a little tricky on occasion. And we have watched clients and said, hey, you can still do it this way, but here are these extra steps that'll be involved. And that doesn't work. So that did force us to continue to find a better solution to make sure that we were finding something that could meet those business needs so that it did have less hangups. And it's just really important that you find someone who you can come to with those concerns when you can't quite break, but also that you're open-minded to adjust to the way that they will lead you to do things. Because again, we do have a proven method. We have strong baseline that I will tell everybody I would love that I could just turn on in your environment and voila, you're there. But it's usually not quite that simple.
Yeah, there's usually some impact to it all. With 15 minutes left, Courtney, I think we should power through some of these last ones. I want some time for Q&A and interaction. So let's take it away on lesson number 8 here.
Deadlines drive progress. This one's pretty straightforward. We watch a lot of companies, and for good reason, they want to like be at a 110 or have all the T's crossed and I's dotted before they schedule an assessment. The best way to get your leadership and everybody on that same page to move forward is to schedule an assessment. Don't do anything crazy. Make sure it's a timeline you can meet. But once you have it on the book, you have a deadline. People will make the decisions. It will get everybody across the finish line. And it's a great way to get everybody on the boat rowing in the same direction because, well, it's expensive and people want to make sure it's successful.
Yeah, this is a personal lesson learned from my entire life. Human psychology is at work here. Something of a perfectionist, as I mentioned with SSPs. Our poor C3PAOs who support us sometimes get frustrated because our SSP, sometimes if I'm involved, gets in right at the last minute because I'm constantly trying to iterate and improve and tighten up. But nothing motivates like that looming deadline to actually get things through and get things done. And if you're the implementer of CMMC in your organization and leadership has, hemmed and hawed a bit, having that deadline impending and having those consequences really start to form, where you can look in the mirror and you say, oh, the thing in the mirror is approaching. It's a great way to remove roadblocks. To Courtney's point, don't recklessly do it. Pick some date that you can actually support. But it tends to make things real in a way that a lot of companies aren't taking very seriously or very real until very late in the game. And then they can fall behind very quickly and suddenly have 30 days to pull something together.
Love this one. Don't use CMMC as your time to be a groundbreaker, or really maybe don't use it for your security program to be a groundbreaker. We live in a world of AI. There are some people, Andy, who have what I call shiny thing syndrome, which is, here's this new tool. It looks awesome. Maybe we should be using it. Maybe this is what we should be doing. You definitely want to consider those things, but you also want to have a careful lens. We've talked about what's the biggest attack vector, being phishing. And the best way to prevent that? Solid MFA, which is a tried and true practice in the security ecosystem. So you don't want to be slow to adopt new things, but you also want to make sure that you're doing things that make sense and maybe don't volunteer to be the first person to try out a new tool or a new thing, or be like, why don't we completely reinvent the wheel on our security program? Because fundamentals work and they've been around for a long time for a reason.
Yeah, the only color I'll add there is there's a time and a place to find a new hill to die on. Oftentimes, that's to Courtney's point. That's what I like to do. And Sentinel Blue has challenged a lot of the ecosystem's status quo, and we've gone to our own assessment, sometimes putting forward something that's aggressive in terms of interpretation. We tend not to do that with our client environments. The risk is different, and the objective is different. So don't feel the need to tread new ground at this point. Like I said, there's something close to 1,000 certified organizations. I would guess 900 of those 1,000 have a very, very similar architecture. If your objective is to, hey, focus on your business and the CMMC cert is a way to secure and protect your ability to do that business, don't risk reinventing the wheel. You can go with what works. All right, let's bring it home.
This one, mostly Andy can touch on this, but the main point behind following the Starbucks model is where possible, keep it simple and keep your network simplified, and focus your controls on your endpoints and your users.
Yeah, this is one that I love to make this point. When it comes to CMMC scoping, if you can scope your offices out of the CMMC scope, your offices, your facilities, by way of eliminating really all it's about is eliminating clear text or plain text or unencrypted CUI traversing the network, then you can create what effectively serves as a Starbucks. Your office becomes a place where people get Wi-Fi, they get coffee, and they can sit down and have a chat and find a spot to work. If you can keep your network out of scope, there's a lot that buys you in terms of simplifying your implementation. It's a great way to start pulling back on physical security requirements, especially if you're not going to use paper CUI. And Courtney mentioned this earlier. If you can eliminate printing, by all means do. Paper CUI adds a ton of complexity and additional requirements that if you can do away with it, simplifies a lot. And then at the network level, if you can keep your local network, your office network out of scope, and you only have encrypted CUI on your laptop and then the cloud services you're consuming, then the physical stuff can be entirely thrown out, or not thrown out, but set aside as not applicable, essentially. Similarly, a lot of the network level requirements that NIST 171 requires suddenly become not relevant. You don't have to talk about how you secure wireless access when you can say, well, our Wi-Fi is out of scope because our office is effectively Starbucks. So that pays dividends if you can architect your network that way. And always be looking, the broader point here is always be looking to simplify your scope. It minimizes the blast radius of where you have to take all this compliance stuff into account. So those are our 10 lessons. I have one last little thing here, which is the real lesson I've learned through all this, and I talk about this a lot with our customers, especially as we are rapidly approaching their assessment date. Everyone in the entire ecosystem just needs to relax. Like, everyone just needs to take a breath. Every client of ours will tell you, all 20, that the build up to the last moment before the assessment is mildly terrifying. It has loomed large in everyone's brain for years. We've had all this time to create this scary monster. It's like we've all been watching Jaws, and compliance it's just the spooky fin off in the distance, right? It's the thing they don't show you. The experience for pretty much everyone on the other side of it has been like, wait, what? That was it? Like, I was expecting, I thought it was gonna be a big scary shark that was gonna like eat us, and you're like, no, it's just a fish. Like, you take the right approach, you do things the right way, just relax. Not to downplay the importance of CMMC and getting it right, but another thing I often tell people is, while it is a binary pass or fail, it allows for mistakes. It allows for you to correct things. It's actually very forgiving in terms of what that allows. And if you pick the right partner in terms of a C3PAO who will extend a lot of latitude, there is area for that, for fixing things. Now you want to you want to nail it and not have to fix things, especially technical. It's not the big scary thing that we've all been creating in our heads. So just take a moment to relax. All right. Well, with that, I want to ask if anyone has any questions. And one thing I'll prompt in the chat, if people could weigh in on this. Sentinel Blue has been living the CMMC life pretty much nonstop since the beginning of the program. 20 assessments, including a couple, or not including a couple DIBCACs we supported, and a lot of prep for our upcoming round of assessments. We've just been sort of heads down. We have a lot of information, a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge that we've accumulated. As you can see, some lessons learned. We'd love to know what you would like to hear from us. We'd love to know what questions you have, or when we put on content like this, what you would love to hear. One of our main things anytime we're putting out content is we want to really make sure we're not treading the same ground everyone else has tread. Everyone's been told, what is written in your SSP must reflect the truth. I think we all get that. But what aren't you hearing? What lessons aren't being shared? What questions aren't being answered? We tend to feel like we've had enough experience, we could probably weigh in on that and give you a realistic answer. So if anyone has any ideas or requests on content, we'd love to meet you where you're at. Otherwise, we'd like to open the floor for any questions. While we wait and see if any questions come in, I'll just throw this up. Resources. A couple things we recommend. One, you can always feel free to reach out to us, but obviously there's no obligation in any of this that you all reach out to us for anything. I participate a lot in what's called the CUI Center of Excellence. It's a Discord server, and it's almost 5,000 people strong. It is not sponsored. It's not owned. There's no paid vendors. In fact, it's very, very protected against vendors. It's a great space for collaboration, for asking other people how they're solving these problems. There's a ton of channels on every topic related to CMMC you can imagine. Highly recommend getting involved there. And the community is incredibly welcoming and incredibly free in sharing their information. So highly recommend. It's also got a subreddit. It's just reddit.com/r/CMMC. Another great place to collaborate and ask questions and get some help. Deborah's asking a great question. She's setting me up for controversy right out of the gate. If an organization is interested in joining the CMMC ecosystem, what would you recommend, RPO or C3PAO? So let me first offer some transparency. I'm on the Cyber AB, has a C3PAO Industry Advisory Council. It's an 11-member council, and we're approaching a lot of the ecosystem issues and putting together white papers and things of that nature to try to guide the ecosystem. That said, like, I'm very involved in the CMMC ecosystem, and Sentinel Blue is obviously very financially entangled with CMMC. So if anyone has, all the reasons to support the CMMC ecosystem, it's us, but I'll also be the first critic. I think the RPO system is useless and really lacking in value. The credentials to become an RPO are largely that you can support the financial transaction of paying for it, not that you've accumulated and demonstrated any particular expertise. I will say there are some phenomenal companies out there who are RPOs. They tend to be the exception. I would be very skeptical of an RPO by nature of their credential as knowing what they're talking about. It's vastly different. A C3PAO, on the other hand, not to say that they're all perfect, but a C3PAO has to go through a DIBCAC high, which is where the DoD folks come and assess you against 171, and you have to pass with a perfect score. And you have to go through, you have to have CCPs and CCAs who go through a mandatory, much more robust training and an examination process. And the exam is, Courtney and I can tell you, it's not exactly easy. So the difference in terms of expertise there is very significant. I really don't like the way the CMMC ecosystem originally positioned RPOs as like, these are the people who implement, and C3PAOs just do assessments. We made the decision early on, once we figured out, wait a minute, C3PO is a much deeper depth of expertise to build. Obviously, we're going to go down that path because we want to be top of the craft, experts in this field. So we've been a C3PAO, really since you were able to be one back in 2022. So that's my thought on it. I'm not going to say don't become an RPO, but if you really want to stand out and you really want to dive in deep, a C3PAO route is great. Otherwise, if it's just about the individuals, I would recommend getting your CCP. Don't worry about your RP. Companies like Sentinel Blue, when we're hiring, and not to say that we don't give any credence to RP, but we like it a lot more when people have their CCP. And Courtney's not in a role where she's going to be doing assessments. She's got her CCP because we wanted her to actually go get the knowledge that supports our clients. So even if CMMC certified, did we still need to go through a DIBCAC? That's particular for C3PAOs, yes. That's not true for everybody. For whatever reason, C3PAOs, we have to go through a DIBCAC, which makes sense. And they're not offering any form of reciprocity for us to get CMMC Level 2. So yes, we do have to have both every 3 years, which, it is what it is. For organizations in the DIB, once you have your CMMC Level 2, DoD tells you, and it's in the contracts, essentially, that they have the right at any time to perform a DIBCAC if they want. It's going to be a very small minority of contractors who are ever going to go through a DIBCAC. Glad I see some friends connecting in the chat. All right, got a couple minutes left. Happy to take any further questions. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. Courtney's on LinkedIn. I'm simply Andy at sentinelblue.com. I'm always open for questions or connection. I'm also, I think we're both going to be at CS5 if anyone's going to be there. CS5 in San Diego here in a couple weeks, often at the CMMC events and various cybersecurity events. So always feel free to approach our booth or approach me, approach Courtney, say hey, and we're here to share what we've learned, absent any obligation. If you just want to ask, we'll share whatever we can. Also check out the Watchers. I'm wearing my Watchers shirt. That's our podcast that we do. Had some great conversations with some really cool people. Check that out. It's thewatchers.io, but it's also on our Sentinel Blue YouTube, which you'll get a link to when this video goes up.
Shameless plug. I just want to say thank you everyone for your time.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. It being the top of the hour, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully this was helpful. We're looking for feedback. If this was helpful, amazing. If there's something else that we're hoping to hear or would like to hear in future, again, we'd really love to hear that. We want to make good information, good content that actually helps you all. So we appreciate you.